Those of you taking in the fall, I guess the biggest thing you need to know is the coming of the digital LSAT. So the LSAT is going digital this summer, starting in July. Half of test takers will receive the digital format, half will receive the paper and pencil format. LSAC chooses for you, and you don't get any advance notice. And so for that reason, I don't love the idea of taking it in July. One thing you could do is take it in June, and that way, if you were to take it in July, you'd only have another 5 to 6 weeks to stay fresh on the LSAT. And so for that reason, I think that July is good only if you've also been going for June. But if that's not the case for you, and you're going for September, October, November, and so on, in that case, what I would suggest is just prep as if you're going for digital, because that's what it's going to be. Starting in September, the LSAT will be 100% digital. It'll be on a tablet, specifically the Microsoft Go tablet is what they'll be using. Now, if you want to prep accordingly, I'd say get a tablet. It doesn't have to be that one, though. If you already have an iPad, that's fine. I recommend also potentially getting a Samsung Galaxy tablet if you don't have one. That's pretty affordable. It's around $250 or $300. And that tablet is a good one. I'd say it's probably good enough, and it'll certainly run LSAC's digital LSAT format. So LSAC on their site, they have this familiarization tool. It's at familiar.lsac.org. And so if you go on there, you can play around with it. You can use it, of course, on your computer, whether it's a desktop or a laptop, but you can also do it on the tablet, and then it'll more closely replicate the actual test date experience, of course. And then if you don't have that, you have a smartphone, it'll work on that too. So go to familiar.lsac.org and you can try out what the digital LSAT looks like and see the interactive features. It's kind of cool, actually. You can highlight with this tool they have. You can underline with that tool. You can enlarge the text. There's a countdown timer, and you can also flag questions. And of course, you're also not losing any time to bubbling. So I think it could help you save a little bit of time. But there are some downsides, though. One big downside is that you can't draw freehand on the tablet. So for that reason, you kind of have to do it separately on your own on scrap paper, and then kind of go back and forth between the two. So I'd say get a tablet if you can. If not, use a smartphone. That'll be the best way to replicate what it looks like. If you can't do that, though, I'd say get your hands on the PDFs if you can, and then use the PDFs. If you can study with the PDFs, then that'll be a great thing, because you can go between the PDFs and the scrap paper. So that's something to consider too. And then you have pretty much as much scrap paper as you need. I wouldn't really be concerned about a limit on that. What I think you do have to get used to is going back and forth between the screen and the paper, and the screen and your notebook. So if you've been using the actual books of 10 exams on Amazon, getting those, the actual official LSAT prep tests, that's great, but it's not really enough. So I'd say if you're doing digital, again, get the PDFs if you can, have them up on your screen and go back and forth between them, since that's what you'll be facing. One feature of the digital LSAT you should be aware of is that there's a countdown timer going down from 35 minutes. At the 5-minute warning, you can't remove it. And so to me, that'd be a little bit nerve inducing, because you kind of see it constantly moving. So again, you want to practice for the digital format with that in particular. Now, if you're taking it in the fall, you've got quite a while. You've got over 5 months to study, which is awesome, because the best LSAT studying occurs over a period of 5 to 6 months. That's what it really takes in order for you to reach your fullest potential. So if you were taking it only in, let's say, tomorrow, obviously studying in one day wouldn't be enough. And if you were doing it in June, that's a decent amount of time. That's about 2 months. But starting from scratch, it wouldn't really be enough for you to achieve your highest, fullest potential. And since the LSAT score is, of course, the #1 factor in law school admissions that matters, I would definitely recommend giving it the time that it deserves. You know, it's funny, you kind of earn your undergraduate degree over the course of 3 to 4 years, but your LSAT score is more important than that, yet it all comes down to that day. And so I want you to think about it, that it is worth investing everything you can in that particular day, but also know, to reduce the anxiety a bit, that it isn't all about that one particular day. Because while the LSAT as a whole is extremely important, no one particular LSAT test date will make or break your score, because you can always retake. Law schools do not average multiple LSAT scores. They only take the highest score. And so for that reason, there's never really a downside to retaking. Let's say the LSAT has that margin of error of 3.5 points on either end, meaning that just through luck alone, you could get a 160 one day and a 164 the next day. And the 164 will get you into many more law schools and get you a lot more scholarship money than the 160 would. And so if that's happening through nothing more than staying fresh on the LSAT for another 5-6 weeks to kind of do another handful of exams, that alone, just through luck alone, raises your score, raises your odds of getting in places, gets you more scholarship money. And of course, if your score remains the same or it goes down, no big deal, because law schools only consider your highest LSAT score. That's all that matters. Even though that say they consider multiple, they're lying. I don't know why they say that. All they have the incentive to do is consider the highest, because that's what gets factored into the US news rankings, which is kind of what their jobs are all about, is helping their schools stay high in the rankings. And that incentivizes them to give scholarship money when your score is above the median for their school. So definitely consider the retakes as an option. Now that the LSAT is offered 9-10 times a year, there's always another test date just around the corner in another month or two. And so let's say you're thinking of the fall, you have 3 test dates in the fall alone. You have September, October, and November. Then you have January as well. And you could take the LSAT in January and still apply that cycle. So let's say you take the LSAT in January 2020, you could then still start law school in September 2020. That's not too late in the cycle. And the cycle has kind of extended over time because of the recent decline in the number of people applying to law school. So for that reason, law schools are waitlisting and deferring more applicants than ever before. So they're waiting to see who else comes along, meaning that if you take the LSAT in January or March, or even potentially beyond that, law schools will still want to look at those scores and still consider them for that cycle. Now, in terms of how you structure your studying, there's a couple of things I want you to think about. LSAT studying best happens in 3 phases: accuracy, untimed, then pacing under timed conditions with individual sections, and finally endurance with full-length 5-section exams. Now, if you've got a 5-month timeline or a 6-month timeline, that's great because you could spread it out slowly. You don't have to try and cram it all at once and try to burn out or end up burning out in just a period of 2 months or so. So you could theoretically devote 1 month to games, 1 month to reasoning, and then 1 month to reading comprehension, and then make the following 2 months about pulling it all together with the pacing and the endurance. So let's say you start off with games. You could do the easiest ordering games first, then the moderate difficulty ordering games, then the most difficult ordering games, then do different types of grouping games going from easy to moderate to hard, and so on. Doing all of this untimed just to learn the fundamentals, and then move on to individual sections of games timed, and then the full-length timed exams. But you have to give yourself that time to learn the basics. You have to give yourself that time to get the accuracy down, because the pacing will add a whole nother level to this. And if you don't already know how to do them under untimed conditions, how will you do them timed, of course? So let's say you focus on games. You still do want to do some work on reasoning and reading comp during that period so that you're exposing yourself to them and not getting rusty on them. And then when you move on to reasoning, you still want to do some games and reading comp at the same time. So maybe if you have one period of focus on games, that's devoted, let's say that's taking up 75% of your focus, and then you're devoting 12.5% of your focus to reading comp, 12.5% of your focus to logical reasoning. And you could just kind of divide your LSAT study over that ratio of, let's say, maybe 4-to-1-to-1 or 8-to-1-to-1 or something else like that. I'm not a math person. I'm an LSAT person. They're a bit different, of course. So that's what I'd say about structuring your studying. And of course, the best material of all is actual LSAT exams. You can get them in books of 10 on Amazon for about $20 each. And they're called actual official LSAT prep tests. And so given a 5-month timeline or longer, I would say start off with exams 52 to 61, then 62 to 71, and then doing the other newer exams in the 70s and 80s as individual full-length 5-section timed exams. LSAC only publishes them as 4 sections, not 5. So to get the 5th section, you take it from another exam. So let's say you're doing exams 83, 84, 85, and 86 as full-length timed exams over a 4-week period. You could then take exam 82 and divide it into 4 parts and take each one of those 4 parts and insert them in exams 83, 84, 85, and 86. And then later you can tally your results for 82 to see what that would have been like. Now, again, 5 sections, very important. Endurance is huge. On LSAT test day, you'll be doing 3 sections back to back with no break, then a short 10-minute break after that, then another 2 sections back to back. Now, it used to be that you do the writing sample at the test center after doing those full 5 sections. That's no longer the case starting in June. Starting in June and then forever after, as far as we know, you'll be doing the writing sample later at home or wherever you take your laptop on your own time. They'll monitor you with a microphone and a webcam to make sure it's really you doing it. They'll have you hold up your government ID to make sure it's really you once again. And this is all just for security. Maybe if they have doubts over someone's English fluency or writing ability, something like that, only then might they look at it. Otherwise, law school admission officers really don't care since the LSAT, since the writing sample is not scored, it doesn't really mean too much to them. I suppose, and one thing you should know is that as well, it's still the same 35-minute time constraint as always. But again, since it's not scored, I wouldn't devote too much attention to it. Then the next change, of course, is July. Half of students get digital, half get paper and pencil. LSAC chooses for you, no advance notice. Then September and beyond, 100% digital on the tablet. Now, some folks will ask, well, how will admission officers consider the digital LSAT since it's kind of a new thing? Students aren't really used to it. And I have 2 answers on this. One is that, of course, they will have some sympathy for folks who are doing the digital for the first time. But at the same time, it is a numbers game. It is very numbers driven. And law schools, they have to go by the numbers because their jobs are based on the rankings. And so the real answer is if your digital results aren't where you want them to be because you say you would have done better in the paper and pencil format that is no longer available going forward beyond July, then the answer is just retake. Just retake and hope to do better and improve yourself. And if you have to take it 2, 3, 4, 5 times, that's okay. Because law schools don't average multiple LSAT scores and they only take the highest, there's really no reason not to retake if you think you can do better. And that is ultimately the only way for you to demonstrate your LSAT abilities. So again, my suggestion is just retake. And maybe it takes 3 or 4 times. And that obviously is not a fun position to be in. You don't want to have to do that. But more people than ever are retaking. It has become very normal to do it 3 or 4 or even more than that. So just take it till you get what you want or until you decide that, you know what, you've reached the best that you can with the amount of time that you have to devote to this. And then, of course, you can go forward and just go for the next time. And because there are 86 numbered exams and a handful more that are unnumbered, there's plenty of practice material out there for you to study from. Now, if you're going for, let's say you're going for September, but you know you might want to retake, then you should save a handful of new exams to do in the lead up to October. And that goes for anyone retaking, really. I would say maybe do every even numbered exam in the 70s and 80s, but save the odd numbered exams for a potential future retake. That way you're still exposing yourself to recent material, but you're not consuming all of it now. You're saving a lot of it to do later. And so you definitely want that available to you because you may well need it. Now, if you're studying over such a long time, 5-6 months, you definitely don't want to risk burnout, especially if you aren't working and you're not in school and you're lucky enough to have parents or family supporting you in this to give you the time. You're at risk of burnout no matter what, really. And so you want to make sure you're taking days off. In my day-by-day study plans, I lay out exactly what to do and what not to do. I share with you which LSAT articles to read on my site, which pages in different prep books to read as foundational material, and then which full-length timed exams to do and which practice problems to complete all throughout your study journey. And so on my website, go to lsatblog.blogspot.com. In the books tab at the top, you click that. You'll find the day-by-day study plans there. And that's really the best way to stay on track with exactly what you need to do every single day over the entire course of your prep. And the reason I bring that up is because I work in days off there. You can't study for this 7 days a week. It will lead to burnout and then your score plummets. You really don't want to experience that. It's disheartening and discouraging. And people, of course, you equate your LSAT score with your self-worth and your ego and your aptitude and your IQ and all that. And I was definitely there back when I was studying too for a very long time. my scores stayed in the low 150s and I was taking an exam a day and it was too much. And I was tracking my scores obsessively on spreadsheets and documenting everything I ever got wrong. But doing just exam after exam after exam will lead to burnout. It will kind of wreck your mindset and your emotional health too. And it's not worth it. It's not the right way to do it. I would rather you study smarter, not harder, and do fewer practice problems and review them in more depth. So when you review, it's not only about what you get wrong. It's also about everything you get right and everything you have that, but you still have difficulty with. So let's say you're down to 2 answer choices. Half the time you pick the wrong one, half the time you pick the right one. You don't want to focus only on the ones you get right, on the ones you get wrong, because the ones you got right, it could have just as easily gone the other way next time around. And so if there's any ambiguity in your understanding, you risk getting it wrong the next time. So let's say that you're scoring at a 160, you're doing pretty well. You're getting maybe 20 questions wrong, but there's another 5 to 10 questions that you guessed on and got lucky. Because it could have easily gone the other way, you've got to study those too. I want you to have a running list, like a journal or a diary or a document or something listing everything you ever got wrong and everything you ever had trouble with. And I want you to reattempt those questions a week later or a month later and do them again and again. If you ever got it wrong, I want you to do it at least 3 to 5 times and see, are you getting it right the following times? Because if you get it wrong at least once, that's a problem. Because then you could very easily get it wrong again in the future. You have no way of knowing that you'll get it right every single time unless you're attempting it all of those times. So save that journal, run through it multiple times, and see where you stand. That's really your best way to improve your understanding going forward. Because the LSAT has a lot of tricks on it. It has a lot of traps, and you're probably not falling for every single trap or you'd be getting a 120. So if you're not doing that and you're getting at least some questions right, that means you have some understanding and you're not falling for all the traps. You want to see which particular ones you're falling for. You want to see if it's a confusing question stem. You want to see if it's a confusing method of reasoning in the stimulus, or you want to see if there's a particular trap in the answer choices. Yeah, and you want to see if it's a trap of encouragement towards a wrong answer choice or a trap of discouragement away from a right answer choice. And whatever it is, you have to focus there and see what your mistake is so that you can avoid it in the future. There are patterns to this. The LSAT really is a test of pattern recognition. It's not a test of memorization. It's not something you can cram for. And of course, it's not anything you ever learned in school or anything like that before. It's something else altogether. It's a way of thinking. It's a mindset. It's about being critical and skeptical and honing your short-term working memory to hold multiple factors in your head simultaneously. And so I want you to keep that journal, keep that running list, reattempt problems. If you have the PDFs, you could print out multiple copies, especially games, do them again and again and again. And for those who retake and are worried about having burned through every single question ever, that's a lot of work, of course, given that there's nearly 100 released exams. But even if you did do all of them, that's okay. Even if you do every single one, you can redo them and learn from them again. Even if you only want to, let's say, study from the most recent couple dozen and redo those, that's fine. You redo them, you practice them, you do them again and again and again. And because the purpose really is not to measure yourself. It's not really to see where you stand. It's really to just improve your understanding and see the questions in more depth. And it takes time, of course. It takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. Redoing questions is valuable. It's not simply to measure your aptitude. It's not simply to see where you stand. The real value in redoing questions is to make sure that your understanding is solid every single time along the way. So for that reason, I think that it's okay to redo them and see value. Back when I was studying for the LSAT, in the early years when I was tutoring it as well, the most recent book of exams was 29 to 38. And I ended up doing those same questions lots and lots of times as I was teaching it, because that was the most recent book at the time. And so there were some questions, there were some games where it took me until attempt number 20 or attempt number 30 or time number 50 working through that game before I saw particular insights, before I saw particular tricks or inferences to those games. And so I'd say that if you don't have to redo it 20 times, of course, but even redoing it 5 times might be enough for you to see some particular trick to it or gain a particular insight to solving it. And so for that reason, I'd say redoing them is useful. Even if you've done everything out there, there's still more to learn. Now, I know I've said a lot. I'm happy to open it up to questions and take anything that's on your mind. I'm really happy to, anything under the sun is cool with me. You can just type them in the chat window here and I'll be happy to address them. Now, I got one question here asking, did LSAC reveal the official format of how the layout will be for the digital LSAT? Yes, they have. It's over at familiar.lsac.org. You go there, it's LSAC's online familiarization tool. And that website will let you walk through what the digital LSAT looks like in the actual format. There's even real LSAT questions you can work on there. They're from recent exams, I think in the 70s. And you can play with the layout. You can see the countdown timer. You can see the highlighting and underlining tools. You can see how to enlarge the text. You can see how to flag questions. You can see how to eliminate things and choose them. So it's definitely well worth walking through. And for the best functionality, I do it on a tablet if possible. Whatever tablet you have, it should work well with it. And I recommend, of course, using the stylus as well. So you can play with how to do the underlining and highlighting. Like I said earlier, you can't draw freehand on the tablet, which I think is unfortunate because I thought that's the whole point of a tablet. It would be better, you would better replicate what you do on an actual piece of paper, but they're doing what they're doing. Again, it's the Microsoft Surface Go, but any tablet will work for it. And yeah, definitely check it out. Got another question here. What's a good number at LSAT to take in order to get your baseline score? The more recent exams are certainly more relevant. And so anything from the 60s and up is ideal. LSAC does have one free exam in PDF on their site. It's the June 07 LSAT, June 2007. You just Google it, you'll find it. And that's a good one to study from and try out. It's representative of the modern format. It's very similar. No significant differences just for purposes of measuring yourself and seeing where you stand. But I honestly don't recommend doing a timed diagnostic as practice. I don't. I think that the results are typically discouraging because the LSAT really is like learning a foreign language. And so taking a diagnostic will tell you what you already know, which is that you don't know anything yet because you haven't learned this exam. And so because you haven't really done logic games in school or even reasoning or reading comp, you probably haven't ever done anything quite similar to this. You're not going to do well at first, and that's okay. I didn't do well, in my opinion, back when I started. I started off in the low 150s, and I'd always been a good test taker and thought I was going to go to a top 14, and obviously a 150 won't get you there. And so it kind of stressed me out and made me feel like an idiot for a long time as my scores stayed in the low 150s. And it was really through a brutal process of doing dozens of exams and obsessively tracking my results and my errors before I was able to raise it. And so if you're anything like me, it's hard to be stoic about a low score. And so I'd recommend avoiding it if possible. Just learn the basics first, use the study plan first, and work forward from there. Anyway, I hope that answers your question. Again, just get the June 07 LSAT if you want to see what it looks like. But then beyond that, get the most recent books of 10. Another question here. Does the time that you apply to law school matter? Like the timeline, I guess. Like for the fall, should you apply in the summer? Great question. Law school admissions is conducted on a rolling basis, meaning that the applications are evaluated in the order in which they're received. Meaning that, let's say you apply in September when applications open, you could apply then and maybe hear back a month or two later. Law schools, however, are waitlisting and deferring more and more applicants to see who else will come along since there has been a recent decline in the number of people applying to law school. They kind of want to see who else will come along and then admit the best folks possible, the strongest applicants possible. So you might not hear back in the fall, even if you apply in the fall, unfortunately. It's not really necessarily the most polite of them, but they have their own interests to consider. Now, applications are typically opening in September, and then they close around February, March, something like that. The deadlines have gotten more hazy in recent years as they lengthen the timeline and take applications later and later. So you could theoretically apply in February or March or April and then start law school that fall, 5 or 6 months later. So you could do that, but there may not be as much law school scholarship money available to you. And so let's say you want to start law school this fall and we're just beginning April very soon. So April 2019, you then want to start in fall 2019. That's not ideal. There might be slots open, but again, there's not as much scholarship money left. And you might be better off if you instead wait a cycle, apply this fall in September, and then maybe hear back in November or December, and then start law school September of next year. So that could be one option for you. Again, nobody likes to wait. Everybody wants to just kind of get started. But if scholarship money is important to you, or getting to the best school possible is important to you, and you can afford to wait a year, then that is what I would recommend ultimately. I suppose it might be useful if I shared some links to what I've been talking about here. So I will share with you here a link to the schedules, and that will be in the description for this episode later for those listening on the podcast or watching on the YouTube channel. I can also share with you the link to LSAC's familiarization tool, which is at familiar.lsac.org. I suppose I should also link to some of the resources I have on my site or elsewhere as well. So the website is simply LSAT blog at lsatblog.blogspot.com. I also have the LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel at youtube.com/LSATblog. And then I also have the podcast for LSAT Unplugged as well as LSAT Pros. And so on those podcasts and YouTube channels, I have discussions and interviews and classes. So they're a great resource for more information. Of course, they're free and you can listen on or watch on the go. You can stream on your phone. I've done live Q&A sessions, Facebook Lives, in-person class recordings. I've done discussions with law school admission officers, both current and former. I recently had a discussion with a former NYU law school admission officer, and that was a lot of fun. That's been especially popular. And so yeah, it's a great resource. Check it out. I'm happy to design resources and material based around what you need and what interests you the most. You can always email me at lsatunplugged@gmail.com, and I'll share with you my advice, and I'm happy to help however I can. A few things I should highlight other than the day-by-day study plans that I mentioned. They're the most popular resource I have, but I also have guides, checklists, cheat sheets, explanations, and full video courses for every section: games, reasoning, reading comp. I also have a course on law school admissions, the personal statement, as well as my LSAT test day success course, which deals with avoiding test day anxiety and stress and properly simulating test day conditions. So definitely check that out. I also have course packages that involve a mix of study plans and guides and cheat sheets, as well as the video courses themselves. So if it's a bundle, of course, that's a better value for you. I also hold in-person classes and meetups here in New York at my office in downtown Brooklyn. So if you're ever in the area, reach out. I'll be happy to share with you when the next one is, and I'd love to have you come by. Let's see, I got another question here. I should jump back to that. For recommendation letters, is it best to get them from professors only? Professors are good. I'd say I typically recommend getting from at least one or two professors if possible. But if you've done an internship that's relevant or significant, or you have work experience from an internship or a full-time job, you could also get one from your employer. I'd say 2 to 3 rec letters overall is a good number. And so a mix from at least one professor, of course, and then an employer or both professors or more is totally fine. Don't try to get it from a senator or a congressperson or a judge. That they don't care about that. They really want to know that it's someone who knows you personally and can speak to your work ethic and your abilities. So value the closeness of the connection and the degree of personalization of the letter over just how impressive the person might sound. Then, of course, there's the law school personal statement. Don't make it a laundry list of everything you've ever done in your life. Don't make it your resume. Focus on ideally 1 or 2 things max and go deeper on them. And you also want to make it personal in nature, of course. For the character and fitness portion, be honest. If they ask if you've ever been arrested, disclose that. If they ask if you've ever been convicted, disclose that. If you ever had disciplinary action in college or something like that, and they ask about it, disclose that. If you lie or anything or fail to disclose, then you may have a big problem when it comes time to go before the bar and get admitted to the bar as a JD and have a license to practice law. And you wouldn't want to go through 3 years of law school and invest yourself in that only to never be able to practice law due to some silly failure to disclose earlier, way back when you were applying. So definitely recommend honesty there. It's well worth it. Of course, there's also a couple other essays you can submit. There's the diversity statement, which covers anything unique you might bring. If you're from an underrepresented group, you could talk about that. But even atypical diversity statements could work well. Like if you have a unique hobby, or let's say you're from a part of the country they don't typically get applicants, and you have geographic diversity, that's considered valid and useful to include as well. Or if you had a rough upbringing or came from a poor background or something and you had to overcome obstacles, or a child of immigrants or something, that's definitely worth including there too. Then there's the Why Our School essay. Yale notably has one where they ask why you want to go to their law school in particular. And so in that case, definitely personalize it. Talk about specific professors. You could name them, name particular classes or electives or clinics or extracurriculars that you might want to talk about. Mention those specifically. If you visited campus, mention that. If you have had the chance to know an alum of the law school, you could include that as well, just to show that you have some familiarity with the law school in particular. I hope that was helpful. For the personal statement itself, I guess one other thing I should mention is that you want to be ideally max 2 pages double spaced. And so for a rough draft, I recommend making it 3 to 4 times as long. And then you could, of course, cut it down bit by bit and turn as your rough draft goes towards a final draft and have people look it over. Have friends, family, professors, other applicants, folks like myself. As an LSAT coach, I work with my students on their essays as well. You could even go on LinkedIn and ask alums of that law school to give it a read. Believe it or not, even total strangers are sometimes happy to help out. I was speaking with a current Columbia law student recently, and she mentioned that she did this and got like 40 people to read her essay. And how awesome is that? That's potentially great feedback to improve it, because you never know what insight someone might share that could help you out there. Question on the digital LSAT, how to prep overall. I guess 2 big things. One is get a tablet. It's worth it. Even the Samsung Galaxy tablet that's around $250, $300 is worth the investment if it could help you out and get you more comfortable with the format. Alternatively, there are the PDFs. If you can use those, that could be a great way to go between the screen and the paper. And then there's also the LSAC familiarization tool I mentioned. That could be another resource. Again, familiar.lsac.org. You could play around to see what the features are like there. Other questions, other things you folks have on your mind? I'm happy to kind of go anywhere you like with this. Got a question here about scholarships, law school scholarships. What's more impactful in getting a scholarship? Is it the GPA or the LSAT? Typically for law schools, they weigh the LSAT score more heavily than the GPA. And so for that reason, your LSAT score will be a bigger determining factor. Now, specifically how they weigh and how they interact, I can't really speak to that. It varies from law school to law school. If you go on LSAC's website, there is a calculator that's the LSAT GPA calculator. And so if you kind of input different LSAT scores and different GPAs on there, it'll kind of give you a sense of your chances at various law schools. You can see all the data on which law schools have particular medians. So let's say obviously a top 14 law school or a top 5 law school, their median LSAT score will typically be in the high 160s or low 170s. And the GPAs, of course, will be close to 3.8 or 4.0. But specifically, which matters more, I couldn't say. Obviously, at this point, your GPA is probably more fixed than your LSAT score is. And so the LSAT is where you're going to get the most bang for your buck in terms of focusing. Because even 1 point more on the LSAT could mean another $4,000 in value in getting scholarships, you're getting into a better law school. And so the ROI on getting that now, when you're just starting law school, how that scales over the course of your entire legal career is huge. So definitely worth boosting up the LSAT score. I would treat it as if it were maybe a 6-credit class, or as if it were a part-time job, 10, 15, 20 hours per week. Hope that was helpful and answered your question there. Got one here asking, I want to go to law school, but money's holding me back. Do you have any advice? Well, I'd say for law school, of course, you can take out loans, but if money's tight already, I wouldn't recommend taking out too many loans. Part of my job is actually trying to help future law students, law applicants, to go to law school for free or to pay a lot less for it. And so you do that by maximizing your law school scholarship money. And I saw a question about conditional scholarships as well, so I'll kind of combine the two here. There's no strings attached scholarships, which are guaranteed, meaning that even if you didn't do that well first year of law school, you would get to keep the scholarship. Then there are conditional scholarships saying that if you were appearing a certain place in the class, let's say that you are in the top third of the class, you get to keep the scholarship money, but if you fall below the top third, you lose it. Those are really risky, I think. So my opinion on them is I would look at them skeptically, take them with a grain of salt, because law schools will oftentimes offer these conditional scholarships to, let's say, half the class entering. And they'll say, if you are in the top third of the class, you get this money, you get this discount on your tuition. But if you're not, you lose it. The problem is that they're automatically dooming 17% of students to fail that, because obviously you can't have half of people in the top third. It doesn't work out mathematically, right? You lose some. And obviously nobody ever thinks that'll be them, but it's always somebody. So I'd say be careful on this, because let's say law school's harder than you thought, which it will be, or you have other obligations that come up like family or work or unexpected illness or unexpected family issues that could suddenly plummet your law school focus and your performance. And then you suddenly are on the hook for $10,000 or $20,000 more. That's really problematic. And so I'd say conditional scholarships, I wouldn't take them that seriously, because you really don't know how you'll do until you're there. And you don't know how competitive it will be until you're there. And believe me, law schools is very competitive, and it is on a curve. And there's always going to be somebody who has fewer outside obligations than you, someone who's going to study harder than you will. They're always out there. Remember that law applicants are type A gunners. It's a much more brutal competitor pool than what you've had up to this point in undergrad, especially when folks are kind of goofing off and partying a lot of the time. So take it seriously. Focus on maximizing your LSAT score, maximizing your GPA, and then going in with the best numbers possible. And maybe consider going to a lower ranked law school that gives you more scholarship money. So let's say if you are choosing between a school that's ranked 23 on a full ride and a school that's ranked 16 with no scholarship money, you might want to go for the lower ranked school actually. Even if the rank is lower, let's say that it's in your particular area. So let's say you're living in Georgia or Virginia, you want to practice there, you go to law school in the area. Or let's say you're in New York and you're living there, you want to practice there, go to a law school there. I would recommend someone go to Fordham over USC or UCLA, even though they're ranked higher, just because more people in New York know about New York law schools. They're more familiar with that. And so same goes if you're in the Virginia, DC area. I would privilege a law school there more highly than one elsewhere, even if it's ranked slightly lower. So those are my quick thoughts on that. But again, even just 1 point higher on the LSAT can lead to thousands in scholarship money. And so it's worth investing yourself in the process. And you talked about money being tight. I would say there's more free and low cost resources out there than ever before. There's free LSAT exams online. There's PDFs like the June 07 LSAT, like I mentioned. There's a lot of YouTube videos. I have, again, the YouTube channel LSAT Unplugged at youtube.com/LSAT blog. I have the LSAT Unplugged and LSAT Pros podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, and Google Play. LSAT has partnered with the Khan Academy, and that's another free resource. I don't think it's the best one out there, but it's perfectly good if you've got nothing else available to you. So start there. Get the books of exams. They're about $20 each on Amazon. Well worth the investment. A book is the highest ROI investment you'll ever make. So definitely get those books. Don't skimp on those. Got a question about paying for the LSAT, paying to take it. There is a fee. It's currently $190, and it's well worth it because, again, even retaking another point or two higher, don't let the registration fee be an obstacle if it could get you more scholarship money with a higher score. If your finances are really tight and you have tax forms to show that, you can submit your IRS filings and potentially get a fee waiver. And that fee waiver would allow you to take the LSAT for free and give you a free LSAT book as well. I also offer a scholarship on my courses for anyone who has an LSAT fee waiver. So if you email me the fee waiver documentation, I'll give you a scholarship on my courses as well. Got some other questions here I'll run through. Someone's asking, if you have a technical hands-on job on your resume, would you have to change your job description related to law school? No, you wouldn't actually. I'd say a technical background is actually a benefit. It's something that is in high demand these days. Law schools are looking actively for people from the STEM fields because people in the STEM fields tend to be in high demand overall. And so if you are a law school grad who has technical experience, whether it's in science or mathematics or computers or engineering or anything else, you're kind of got a killer combo there because you have the law side and you have the tech side. And so you could be, let's say, be an attorney for Google or an attorney for SpaceX or something else cool like that. And few people have both backgrounds. So I think that's definitely a benefit. And I would be looking to highlight that in your application, highlight it in your personal statement as well. And you can major in anything and go to law school, by the way. So let's say if you majored in English or pre-law, doesn't matter. If you majored in philosophy or physics, doesn't matter. And again, the STEM background actually helps a bit. So I'd consider that. Another question here related. If you have no experience in law and you've been working retail, should you be worried? No, I'd say you can definitely highlight your retail experience as well. You can paint it as a positive, showing how you've dealt with the general public. You can see how difficult the general public can be sometimes and how you handle that responsibility and how you dealt with people there. I think having real world business experience too with sales and marketing is useful, and law schools are looking for folks who can be business savvy, because more and more law jobs are as solo practitioners. The big law jobs in corporate law are harder to come by, and there's more competition for them. And so more and more people are hanging out their own shingles and starting their own solo practices. And so marketing is a huge part of this, and dealing with the general public and being a people person is extraordinarily useful. So I'd say definitely highlight that. Don't be ashamed of it. Put it on your resume, put it on your personal statement as well. Got another question here saying, I waited until March to apply to law school with a 2.73 GPA and a 164 LSAT. Only applied to 3 schools, one of which I hadn't heard back from. One of them's William and Mary, which rejected me, and the other is GMU, accepted with a conditional scholarship, 40% of tuition. It sounds like I should retake the LSAT. I'm registered already for June, and also reapply this fall. Yes, I would say you should retake the LSAT and you should reapply. I think that given a 2.73 GPA, that's not that high, of course. And I know it's LSAT's calculation, which may not fully represent things, but it is what it is. 164 is a very good LSAT score. But I think, honestly, the biggest thing that stands out to me here is that you only applied to 3 law schools. I think you're not casting your net wide enough. Most people, I recommend applying to 10 to 12 schools. And then if you get multiple offers, multiple scholarship offers, you can play them off each other and say very politely, of course, don't try to be like a hardball negotiator and get nasty with people, but say, honestly, I really would love to go to your law school, but such and such other law school offered me more money. Can you match that? Or can you exceed that? And I think getting only one scholarship offer is not enough, because you want to be able to go to more law schools and kind of play them off each other, like I said. And even if you apply to 10 law schools and maybe you wouldn't really love to go to 2 or 3 of them, even if those 2 to 3 you're not so excited about offer you money, you can still go to the schools you do care more about and shop their offer around and say, hey, this school offered me this money, and they might match it. And then you end up getting that money at the school you did want after all. So I think there's more opportunities out there to you, and you just have to kind of seek them out. It's easier than ever to apply to more schools because it's all online now, and the essays are kind of the same for all of them typically. So yeah, do it online, apply to more. A lot of schools have application fee waivers if you ask or you poke around a bit. And so you could apply for free to another 10 schools probably. There's like something like nearly 200 schools out there, or at least 150. And so cast a wide net, apply to lots of them, even if you don't really want them, just to have the offer to shop around, once again, I think would be worthwhile to you. And yeah, I know it's not fun to wait a year, but in the grand scheme of things, over the course of your entire career, I'm sure you still have many, many more years ahead of you. And so it's maybe worth getting some more work experience and delaying a bit, saving up a bit first. If you withdraw from a scheduled LSAT, does it hurt your application? Or is it something law schools won't be aware of? So law schools, they won't know if you withdraw. They won't know if you postpone. But if you cancel, law schools will know. So I'd say if you feel like it's not going to be what you want it to be the day before or a few days before, a week before, then I would withdraw then and look ahead to the next LSAT. You don't want to have a take on your record if you can avoid it. You don't want to have a cancel on your record if you can avoid it. And law schools don't average multiple LSAT scores, like I said, but taking it 3, 4, 5, 6 times beyond that starts to look fishy, even though 5 or 6 is still okay. But you don't know ahead of time how many times you'll end up needing to take it. And so for that reason, I would say withdraw if you know it's not going to be what you want it to be. Another question here. I have an MPA and I'm a disabled vet. Talk about that. Put it on your resume. I think law schools do actively seek out veterans. They want to thank them for their service, and they understand, obviously, that veterans have dealt with some hardships that many others have not dealt with. So I think you could probably write a very compelling, honest, authentic, personal statement about your experience. And if not, just having that on your record, I think will definitely help you a bit. And it may help with scholarships and things of that nature as well. So I would definitely seek out scholarships specifically for veterans, former military. I think they're out there. You said about applying to 3 law schools. Yes, I did limit myself by only applying to 3. I have a phone conference with the dean next Monday with no negotiating power. Well, you don't have to go this cycle. You could walk away. If they won't offer you what you want or what you need, just say, you know what, no thanks. I'm going to reapply for next cycle. And then you come back at them with better numbers, with a better LSAT score, and maybe with some other schools that you can play their offers against each other. So I think there's no need to apply now when you have low negotiating power. Kind of go for round 2 and come back in a stronger position. Someone's asking, are canceled scores frowned upon? Having 1 or 2 of them is perfectly fine, but more than that starts to look a little questionable. Like maybe you're not exercising perfect judgment by taking the LSAT only when you're ready. And so obviously 1 or 2 cancels, no big deal, but it does raise a red flag and suggest that maybe your score would not have been that great. Again, though, because law schools don't average multiple LSATs and they only take the highest, you can always retake and it won't really be that big a deal. But I think that, let's say if you had 4 or 5 cancellations, that would look a little bit iffy. Got a question here. Does having disciplinary action in college automatically reject you from going to law school? Probably not. It depends how bad it is. If it was criminal nature and something more serious, then I think that it could hurt a bit. Let's say if you murdered somebody, that would obviously be a bit of a red flag. Although I actually have seen people who go to law school who are like documented as having committed murder. There's some news articles on it. It was kind of interesting to see there. But anything smaller, like let's say, a very common thing is underage drinking. I think law schools are very much willing to overlook that. And you could write a short statement, like an optional essay or addendum explaining, let's say, I was young, I was foolish, it was a mistake, it won't happen again. I learned from the experience. I learned about being safe with alcohol, and I obeyed the rules ever since then. And just kind of succinctly and honestly, directly address it, and take the blame for it. Don't try to justify it or excuse it or put it all on somebody else and make excuses. Just be honest about it, and it won't be that big a deal most likely. If you have a personal question or something you don't want to disclose to everyone here, you can feel free to privately email me and I can give you my quick take on it. But overall, if you just honestly address it, it won't be a big deal and certainly shouldn't exclude you. I think that especially things like underage drinking or a parking ticket, things like that don't really matter that much. And most people have something like that. So it's definitely excusable, at least on their end. They can overlook it, I think, and understand. Someone's asking about Seton Hall specifically. Someone who wants to practice law in New York and wants to go to Seton Hall. I think there are probably a decent number of Seton Hall grads in New York City. It doesn't have the highest reputation, of course. I don't think its rankings especially high, but if you can go there with scholarship money, it could be worth it. I recently had a student who got a great score. He got in the 160s, the mid to high 160s, I believe, and he could have gone to a tier 1 school, but he chose Seton Hall because it was a full ride and he didn't want the debt. So, and I think that was a perfectly fine choice. I think it was a good choice to make, given his situation. He has a family. He wanted freedom post-graduation. And so there's a lot of folks who want to practice law for idealistic reasons, but then they graduate with big debt and they have to take the corporate law job or the government job, and then they never end up doing what they really want to do. Like let's say it was public interest or nonprofit work, and it's because of the debt. And I understand that, it's understandable, but I think you can avoid being in that position in the first place by taking the scholarship money at the lower ranked school. Especially if you want to open your own practice, you don't really need the brand name of a top 14. That's really more for a corporate law job. I think for most other situations like small firm life or government work or work on your own, I think the brand name doesn't really matter that much. And yeah, I think that the other question you're raising here about employment outcomes, of course, Columbia and NYU do have high bar passage rates. St. John's will have a lower bar passage rate. So I think that, yeah, you do want to consider that. Will the law school properly prepare you for the bar? Law schools, especially lower ranked ones like St. John's, they are doing more to help students with bar prep to help them pass the bar in the end. But obviously, top 5 schools like Columbia and NYU will have a better employment network. But it's a bit of a trade-off. I think that honestly, a top 5 school, even paying for it entirely with loans and having big debt afterwards, I think is probably still a good decision, just because you can go to a top 5 and pretty much go anywhere you want nationally or internationally. It has those have the reputation. But kind of a middle of the road school with no scholarship money versus a lower ranked school with scholarship money, I think you might want to go to the lower ranked school. And so you can go on lawschooltransparency.org, I believe, Law School Transparency. They publish employment stats and they kind of remove the manipulation you're talking about. So I think playing around with those stats and seeing what the outcomes actually are like is really valuable. And you can talk to law schools and ask them pointed questions and see how willing they are to actually disclose that information versus kind of hem and haw about giving it away. And their level of forthrightness, I think, will definitely be indicative of what the situation is like. Yeah, thanks for the link there. Yeah, lawschooltransparency.org, great site. Definitely recommend it. CUNY Law, I think, is a great option because it's a public school. It's a public university. And so for that reason, the tuition is a lot lower than you'll pay at a private school. And most law schools are private. The tuitions are high. They're like, believe it or not, $50,000 a year, $50,000 a year. And so think about that for 3 years, plus living expenses, plus opportunity costs. The debt ends up being something like $300,000 if you're paying for it totally out of pocket. And that is a stat from Law School Transparency if you want the background on that. But really, again, go for the schools with the full ride, go for the schools with the scholarship money, unless it's a top 14 or a top 5, or unless, of course, your parents are supporting you or your family is supporting you. So yeah, think about those issues. I had a great discussion recently with Rachel Gazurse, who is a law career expert. It's on the YouTube channel. And she talked through some of the networking things you can do about post-graduation employment if you want to check that out. Anyway, folks, should wrap up soon. Again, my site is the LSAT blog. The YouTube channel and podcast are LSAT Unplugged and LSAT Pros. If you want to check those out, I'm happy to help however I can as you move forward with your prep. I got a question here about financing law school and helping with scholarships. What I do is I offer a 50% scholarship on any LSAT course package for those who have a fee waiver from LSAC, as well as those who are former military. I also have a 10% scholarship for those who pledge to practice law in the public interest. So those are some scholarships I offer on my LSAT courses. What else can I share? Let's see. I have all the free resources on my site that I mentioned and the podcast and the YouTube channel. I also am doing something special for a limited time only where I am featuring select students, those who are highly motivated, to be featured on my LSAT Unplugged YouTube channel and podcast, where I will actually coach you and then we'll publish the recording for everyone to benefit from. And so if that is something that interests you, that is a free 30-minute coaching session, and I will share the link with you now. If you would like to apply for that, you can also see a few of those coaching sessions on my YouTube channel right now. I just published them recently at youtube.com/LSAT blog. So you could see what that kind of coaching session would be like. And that's a great chance to have coaching from me personally and the opportunity to share it with others as well. So anyway, folks, we're about at 1 hour now, and I should probably wrap this up. But I want to thank you all for coming out today and wish you all the best as you move forward with your prep. Again, my site is the LSAT blog at lsatblog.blogspot.com. I also have the YouTube channel at youtube.com/LSAT blog, and I have the LSAT Unplugged and LSAT Pros podcasts on iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and pretty much everywhere else. Again, everyone, thanks for coming. This was a lot of fun. And please keep in touch as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help out however I can. I suppose one other thing I should mention before I sign off is that I also have the LSAT Unplugged Facebook group where I've been doing Facebook Lives and teaching classes there. It's at facebook.com/groups/LSAT Unplugged. So again, everyone, thanks for watching. Thanks for coming today and investing yourself in this process. I wish you all the best with your LSAT prep, and take care. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care.